My brother stole our dad's credit card and turned pale when he got home and said, "Who's the thief that stole my $20,000? I laughed. My name is David, and I'm 25 years old. If someone asked me to describe my family in one word, I'd probably say complicated. But let me start from the beginning, because this story needs context to make sense. I live with my parents and my younger brother in a modest 2-story house in suburban Ohio. My brother is 23, just 2 years younger than me. But sometimes it feels like we're from completely different planets. While I've been working since I turned 18, saving every penny I could get my hands on, dreaming about the day I could open my own auto repair shop, my brother has dedicated his life to what he calls enjoying his youth. Every weekend, without fail, he's out partying until dawn. He knows every bar in town, every club, every place where young people gather to drink and dance. His phone never stops buzzing with messages from different girls, and he changes girlfriends like he changes shirts. Last month, it was the blonde from the coffee shop. This month, it's the brunette who works at the mall. Meanwhile, I spend my weekends either working extra shifts at the garage where I'm employed or studying mechanical engineering books I borrowed from the library. I know it sounds boring to most people, but I have a plan. I've calculated that if I keep saving at this rate, in 2 more years I'll have enough money to rent a small space and buy the basic equipment I need. My parents see things very differently, though. They think my brother is charismatic and knows how to live life. They love hearing his stories about parties, about the adventures he has with his friends, about the girls who are crazy about him. When he comes home at 3 in the morning, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes, they just shake their heads with that indulgent smile parents give to their charming children. But when I come home from work, covered in grease and exhausted from a 12-hour shift, they barely look up from the television. "You work too much," my mother always says, as if it were a character defect. "You should go out more, have fun like your brother." The irony is that my brother has never held a steady job in his life. He's had maybe 5 or 6 different jobs since graduating high school, but he never lasts more than a few months in any of them. There's always some excuse. The boss was unfair, the co-workers were boring, the schedule interfered with his social life. Right now, he's technically between jobs, which is a fancy way of saying he's unemployed. But somehow, he always has money for his night outs. He always has cash for drinks, for new clothes, for gas for his car. I've never asked where this money comes from because, honestly, I preferred not to know. I suspected our parents were giving him money, and that bothered me, but I tried to focus on my own goals. The contrast between us couldn't be more obvious. While I wear the same 3 pairs of jeans and rotate between work shirts and a couple of casual ones, my brother always has something new to wear. While I drive a 15-year-old pickup truck that I bought with my own money, he drives our dad's almost new sedan whenever he wants. Sometimes I wonder if they realize that being a hardworking person isn't a consolation prize. Sometimes I wonder if they understand that I'm building something real, something solid, while my brother is just floating through life without any direction. But I've learned to keep these thoughts to myself. In this house, questioning my brother's lifestyle is considered being jealous or resentful. So I just keep my head down. Keep working, keep saving, and keep dreaming about the day when I can prove that consistency and dedication are worth more than charm and empty promises. The worst part about living in my family isn't just the obvious favoritism, it's the way they justify it. My parents have convinced themselves that their different treatment of us is somehow fair, even logical. Take last month, for example. My brother came home from what he called a networking event, but what was obviously just another night of heavy drinking. He was so drunk he could barely stand, but instead of being angry, my father actually seemed impressed. "Look at him," he said to my mother. "He knows how to make connections, how to be social. That's how you get ahead in life." Meanwhile, that same week, I had worked 68 hours because one of the senior mechanics was out sick, and we had a deadline to meet. When I mentioned it at dinner, hoping for maybe a word of recognition, my mother just sighed and said, "You're going to burn yourself out. Work isn't everything." It's like they live in some alternate reality where being responsible and hardworking is a character flaw, while being reckless and irresponsible is a sign of having spirit and personality. My brother has figured out how to work this system perfectly. He knows exactly what to say to get our parents' approval. When he talks about his party adventures, he frames them as building relationships and expanding his social circle. When he talks about quitting jobs, it's because he's looking for the right opportunity or because he refuses to settle for less than he deserves. And our parents eat it up. They nod along, completely convinced that his chronic unemployment is actually a sign of his high standards and ambition. They're so proud of him for not settling that they don't seem to notice he's never actually achieved anything. The financial double standard is even more obvious. Last week, my brother asked our dad for $200 to buy a new jacket. Not just any jacket, mind you, but a designer leather jacket he saw at the mall. Dad gave him the money without even asking why he needed such an expensive jacket. 2 months ago, I asked to borrow $50 because my work boots were literally falling apart, and I needed a new pair before my shift the next morning. Dad made me sit through a 20-minute lecture about budgeting and financial responsibility before reluctantly lending me the money, which I paid back in full the following week. The emotional wounds from this kind of treatment run deeper than I like to admit. Growing up, I always thought that if I just worked harder, if I just proved myself more, eventually our parents would recognize my efforts and give me the same respect they give my brother. But over the years, I've realized that's not how it works. They don't see my work ethic as admirable. They see it as boring. They don't see my savings as responsible. They see it as obsessive. They don't see my plans for the future as ambitious. They see them as small and unimaginative. My brother, on the other hand, can do no wrong. When he stumbles home drunk at 4 a.m. and wakes up the whole house, they laugh about it the next day. Young people will be young people, my mother always says, as if being 23 gives him a permanent pass to be inconsiderate and irresponsible. When he brings different girls home every few weeks, they think it's charming that he's so popular. When he spends entire days sleeping off hangovers instead of looking for work, they say he's taking time to figure out what he really wants to do. But what really hurts is how they talk about our futures. They're constantly making grand predictions about my brother's success. He's going to do something big someday, my father loves to say. He's got that spark, that charisma that opens doors. They talk about him like he's destined for greatness, like his current behavior is just a phase. When they talk about my future, if they talk about it at all, it's with this patronizing acceptance. David will always be fine, they say. He's steady, reliable. He'll always have work. They make it sound like being dependable is the participation trophy of life achievements. It started about 6 months ago, right around the time my brother quit his job at the electronics store. He'd only been there for 2 months, but according to him, the manager was totally unreasonable for expecting him to show up on time and actually work during his shifts. I was in my room counting the money I'd saved that month when my brother knocked on my door. This was unusual because we rarely talked unless we had to, and he never came to my room. "Hey, David," he said, leaning against my doorframe with that casual smile he uses when he wants something. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I should have known right then what was coming, but I was naive enough to think maybe he wanted to have an actual conversation, maybe even ask for advice about finding a new job. "I'm going out with some friends tonight," he continued, "and I'm a little short on cash. Could you lend me $40? I'll pay you back next week." The request caught me off guard, not because he was asking for money, but because he was asking me. I looked at the bills in my hand, money I'd earned by working extra shifts and skipping meals, and felt something twist in my stomach. "Why don't you ask Dad?" I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. His smile faltered just a little. "I already did. He said I need to learn to budget better, and that $40 is too much for one night out. So I was his second choice, his backup plan when our parents actually showed some financial sense for once. The realization stung, but what bothered me more was the assumption that I would just hand over money I'd worked so hard for. "I can't," I said simply. "I'm saving this for my business." The change in his expression was immediate. The friendly, casual mask slipped, and for a moment I saw something cold and calculating underneath. "Come on, man. It's just $40. You've got like thousands saved up. Don't be so stingy." Stingy? The word hit me like a slap. I worked 60 hours last week for this money. If you want cash for partying, get a job. Not everyone wants to spend their entire life covered in grease, he shot back. Some of us have bigger plans than fixing cars. I felt my temper flare, but I kept it under control. "Really? What are these big plans? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your plan is to live off our parents forever." He pushed off from the doorframe, and I could see I'd hit a nerve. "You know what? Forget it. I don't need your money anyway. I'll figure something else out." But he didn't forget it. Over the next few weeks, he came back 3 more times with similar requests. $25 for a concert, $30 for a date, $15 because he was completely broke until our dad gave him his weekly allowance. Each time, I said no. And each time, his attitude toward me got worse. He started making comments at dinner about how I was obsessed with money and how I counted every penny like some kind of miser. Our parents, predictably, took his side. "David, would it kill you to help your brother out once in a while?" my mother said after one particularly heated exchange. Family should support each other. I wanted to point out that support should go both ways, that I'd never asked any of them for anything, that I'd been completely self-sufficient since I was 18, but I knew it wouldn't matter. In their eyes, I was the selfish one for not sharing my hard-earned money with my unemployed brother. The breaking point came on a Friday night in March. I was getting ready for bed after a particularly exhausting week when my brother barged into my room without knocking. He was clearly tipsy, probably from drinking at home before going out, and his usual fake friendliness was completely gone. "I need $60, he announced, not asked. "No," I replied immediately. "Come on, David, don't be such a tight ass. It's not like you're using the money for anything fun." "I'm not using it for anything fun because I'm an adult with actual goals and responsibilities." He laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Goals? You mean that pathetic little garage dream of yours? You're going to spend your whole life fixing other people's broken cars? And you think that makes you better than me? At least I'm working towards something real instead of just partying my life away." "You know what your problem is?" he said, stepping closer to my bed. "You're jealous. You're jealous that people actually like me, that I know how to have fun, that I'm not some boring workaholic who counts pennies like an old man. And you know what your problem is?" I shot back, finally losing my patience. "You're a spoiled brat who's never had to work for anything in his life. You think the world owes you something just because you can charm our parents." The look he gave me then was pure hatred. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. Instead, he just smiled that cold smile again. "We'll see about that," he said quietly, and walked out of my room. At the time, I thought it was just an empty threat. I had no idea that he was already planning to take what he wanted, whether I was willing to give it or not. It started small, so small that I questioned my own memory at first. I keep my money in a small metal box under my bed, hidden behind some old textbooks. I know the exact amount because I count it every week, tracking my progress toward my business goal. The first time I noticed a discrepancy was on a Tuesday morning in early April. I was sure I had $467, but when I counted, there were only $447. $20 was missing. I spent the entire day at work trying to figure out if I'd miscounted or if I'd spent the money and forgotten about it. But by the time I got home, I was certain something was wrong. I'd been tracking every penny for years. I don't make mistakes like that. Still, $20 seemed like such a small amount that I convinced myself I must have miscounted. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of saving for so long was making me obsessive about every little detail. 2 weeks later, another $30 was gone. This time, there was no room for doubt. I'd counted the money the night before, and I distinctly remembered the total. $512. Now there were only $482. I felt sick to my stomach. Someone had been in my room, going through my things, stealing from me. In my own house, in what should have been my safe space, someone was taking the money I'd worked so hard to save. There was only one person it could be. I waited until my brother got home from whatever he'd been doing that day. He strolled in around dinner time, wearing a new shirt I'd never seen before, looking completely relaxed and carefree. "We need to talk," I said, following him up to his room. "About what?" he asked, but something in his voice told me he already knew. "About the money that's been disappearing from my room." He didn't even try to deny it, didn't even look surprised that I'd figured it out. He just shrugged and sat down on his bed like we were discussing the weather. "Oh, that," he said casually. "I needed some cash, and you weren't exactly being cooperative with the whole lending thing." I stared at him, amazed by his complete lack of shame or remorse. "You stole from me. I borrowed from you. There's a difference. Borrowing implies you asked permission. This is stealing." He rolled his eyes like I was being dramatic. "Come on, David. It's not like you're going to miss $50 out of all that money you've got hoarded away. You act like every penny is sacred or something." "Every penny is sacred," I exploded. "Do you have any idea how hard I work for that money? Do you know what it means to me?" "Yeah, I know," he said, his tone becoming mocking. "It's for your precious little garage, your big dream of spending the rest of your life with your hands covered in motor oil." "At least I have a dream." At least I'm working towards something instead of just taking whatever I want from other people. Look, he said, standing up and facing me. I figured you'd probably notice eventually. And when you did, we'd work something out. I'm not trying to screw you over permanently. I'll pay you back when I get a job. When you get a job? You've been saying that for months. You don't even look for work. I'm being selective about opportunities, he said, using the same phrase our parents always used to defend his chronic unemployment. I'm not going to take just any crappy job like you did. The casual cruelty of that comment, the way he dismissed my work and my efforts, made something snap inside me. Get out of my room from now on, I said quietly. Stay away from my things, he laughed. Or what? You'll tell on me to Mommy and Daddy? Maybe I will. His smile faded. You know they won't believe you, right? Even if they do, they'll just think it's a misunderstanding between brothers. They'll probably make me apologize and then give me money to pay you back. The worst part was that he was probably right. Our parents had such a blind spot when it came to his behavior that they'd likely find a way to excuse even outright theft. Over the next month, the stealing continued and escalated. First, it was small amounts, $10 here, $15 there. But as I started hiding my money better, moving it to different locations, he became bolder. He'd take $20, then $30, then $40 at a time. The psychological impact was worse than the financial loss. Coming home from work and finding my money had been stolen again made me feel violated and helpless. It was my own brother, someone who was supposed to care about me, treating me like a personal ATM. But what really got to me was how normal he acted around the family. At dinner, he'd chat with our parents about his day, make jokes, ask about their work, all while knowing he'd stolen from me that morning. He'd even make comments about how hard I was working, as if he was proud of my dedication, all while spending the money he'd taken from me. I started sleeping with my remaining cash in my wallet, keeping it with me at all times, but even that didn't feel safe. I found myself constantly checking to make sure my money was still there, patting my pocket obsessively, unable to relax even when I was supposedly safe at home. By May, I'd become hyper-aware of my brother's patterns. He usually stole from me when the house was empty, or when he thought I wouldn't notice for a while. I'd started moving my money every few days, hiding it in different places around my room, but somehow he always found it. I was down to keeping just small amounts in my room and hiding the bulk of my savings in my car, locked in the glove compartment. It wasn't a perfect solution, but at least it gave me some peace of mind during the day. Then my father created the perfect storm of opportunity without even realizing it. It was a Thursday morning, and I was getting ready for work when Dad called me into his home office. He was sitting at his desk with his laptop open, looking frustrated with whatever he was trying to do online. David, I need your help with something, he said, holding up a piece of paper with some writing on it. Your mother wants me to order this watch for her birthday next week. It's one of those fancy fitness trackers she's been talking about. I looked at the paper. Mom had written down the exact model number and specifications of the watch she wanted, along with the website where Dad could order it. It cost $349. The problem is, Dad continued, I can never figure out these online stores. All the clicking and entering information and confirming this and that. It gives me a headache. You want me to order it for you? I asked. Would you mind? I'll give you my credit card and the password for my account. You can do it tonight when you get home from work, right? That way it'll arrive by Tuesday, and I can give it to her on Wednesday for her actual birthday. He pulled out his wallet and handed me his main credit card, the one he used for all major purchases. Then he wrote his online banking password on a sticky note and placed it on top of the card. Just charge it to this card, he said, and leave everything here on my desk when you're done. I'll put the card back in my wallet tomorrow morning. I took the card and the note, promising to take care of it as soon as I got home. Dad seemed relieved to have the task off his plate, and I was happy to help. It was such a simple request, and I knew I could have it done in 15 minutes. What I didn't realize was that my brother was standing right outside the office door, listening to every word of our conversation. I went off to work thinking nothing of it. The card and password were safe in my wallet, and I made a mental note to order the watch as soon as I got home around 7 o'clock. It was going to be a long day. We had 3 cars that needed to be finished before the weekend, but at least I had something easy to take care of afterward. Around noon, I got a text from my brother asking what time I'd be home. This was unusual because he never cared about my schedule, but I figured maybe our parents had asked him to help with something around the house. Around 7, I texted back. Why? Just wondering, he replied. I'm going out with friends later. I didn't think much of it. My brother went out with friends most nights, and his plans rarely affected me in any way. I finished my shift, helped lock up the garage, and drove home looking forward to getting the watch ordered quickly. The house was quiet when I walked in. Both of my parents' cars were in the driveway, but I could hear the television in their bedroom upstairs, which usually meant they were settling in for the night. My brother's shoes weren't by the front door, which meant he'd already left for whatever plans he had. I went straight to my dad's office, ready to take care of the online order. That's when I noticed something that should have been a red flag. The office door was closed. Dad never closed his office door unless he was having an important phone call or working on something private. But I was tired from work and focused on getting the task done, so I didn't think too much about it. I opened the door, flicked on the light, and went to the desk where I'd left the credit card and password earlier that morning. The card was exactly where I'd left it. The password note was still stuck to it. Everything looked normal, and I felt silly for even having a moment of suspicion. I sat down at Dad's computer, navigated to the website, and started the process of creating an account and adding the watch to the cart. It was exactly as straightforward as I'd expected it would be. But when I got to the payment screen and entered my dad's credit card information, something strange happened. The transaction was declined. I tried again, thinking maybe I'd mistyped the card number. Declined again. I checked the expiration date and security code. Everything was correct, but the payment kept getting rejected, and the website kept showing an error message about insufficient funds. That's when a cold feeling started spreading through my chest. I picked up the credit card and looked at it more carefully. It was definitely my dad's card. I'd seen him use it hundreds of times, but something was wrong. I opened a new browser window and logged into Dad's online banking account using the password he'd given me. What I saw made my stomach drop. The account balance showed $37.18. For a credit card that usually had a limit of $25,000, that meant someone had spent almost $25,000 very recently. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the transaction history. And there it was, purchase after purchase from earlier that day, starting around 11 in the morning and continuing until almost 5 o'clock. Designer clothing stores, electronics retailers, a travel booking site, restaurant charges, bar tabs, even a jewelry store purchase for over $2,000. Someone had gone on an absolute spending spree with my father's credit card, and I knew exactly who it was. I sat there staring at the computer screen, my heart pounding as I scrolled through page after page of transactions. $24,862. That's how much my brother had spent in a single day using our father's credit card. The purchases told a story of complete recklessness. $800 at a high-end clothing store, $1,200 at an electronics retailer, $3,000 at a luxury menswear boutique, $600 at a restaurant that I knew was one of the most expensive places in the city, and the biggest single purchase, $4,500 at a travel agency for what looked like a week-long vacation package to Miami. I printed out the transaction history, my hands shaking as I watched page after page come out of Dad's printer. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was financial devastation. This was going to destroy my parents when they found out. I heard the front door open around 9:30, followed by my brother's voice talking loudly to someone on his phone. He was clearly in a great mood, laughing and making plans for the weekend. I could hear him coming up the stairs, probably heading to his room. Instead, he stopped by the office door and poked his head in. "Hey, did you get that watch ordered for Mom?" he asked casually, as if he hadn't just committed a felony earlier that day. I turned around in the chair to face him, and I must have looked as sick as I felt because his expression immediately changed. "What's wrong?" he asked, but there was something in his voice that told me he already knew exactly what was wrong. "You want to tell me about your day?" I said quietly, holding up the printed transaction history. For just a second, I saw panic flash across his face, but then, incredibly, he smiled. That same confident, charming smile he used on our parents when he wanted something. "Oh, that," he said, walking into the office and closing the door behind him. "Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that. You were going to talk to me about stealing $25,000 from Dad?" "I didn't steal anything," he said, sitting down in the chair across from Dad's desk as if this were just a normal conversation. "I borrowed it. Same as I've been doing with your money, just on a larger scale." I stared at him, amazed once again by his complete inability to understand the seriousness of what he'd done. You can't borrow money without asking permission. That's called stealing. And you can't possibly pay this back. Sure I can, he said, but his confidence was starting to crack around the edges. I'll get a job, make payments. Dad will understand. Dad will understand that you spent $25,000 in one day? On clothes and restaurants and a vacation to Miami? His face flushed slightly. How do you know about Miami? Because I have the entire transaction history right here, I said, waving the papers. Every single purchase you made today. The question is, how are you going to explain this to Dad? I'm not, he said simply. You are. What? You're going to help me figure out how to handle this. We're brothers. This is what family does for each other. I felt like I was losing my mind. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't ruin each other financially, and family sure as hell doesn't ask each other to cover up major crimes. It's not a crime, he insisted. It's a family matter. It's fraud. It's identity theft. Do you have any idea what kind of legal trouble you could be in? For the first time, he looked genuinely worried. But instead of expressing remorse or asking for help figuring out how to make things right, he just got angry. This is all your fault anyway, he said, standing up and starting to pace around the small office. If you had just been reasonable about lending me money when I asked, none of this would have happened. My fault? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're blaming me for your decision to steal $25,000? I wouldn't have had to take such drastic measures if you hadn't been so selfish with your savings. You forced me into this situation. I stood up too, facing him across the desk. Nobody forced you to do anything. You chose to steal from me, and when that wasn't enough, you chose to steal from Dad. These were your decisions. Look, he said, his tone becoming more desperate. We can fix this. We can return some of the stuff I bought. We can cancel the Miami trip. We can figure out a payment plan for the rest. Some of the stuff. What about the $600 you spent at restaurants? What about the bar tabs? You can't return food and drinks. His face was getting redder, and I could see sweat starting to form on his forehead despite the cool evening air. The reality of what he'd done was finally starting to sink in. You know what the worst part is? I said quietly. This isn't even about the money anymore. Dad trusted you. He left his credit card information where you could see it, and instead of respecting that trust, you saw it as an opportunity to steal from him. I didn't plan it, he said weakly. I heard him talking to you about the watch, and I saw the card sitting there. And I don't know. I started thinking about all the things I needed, and before you knew it, you'd spent $25,000 that wasn't yours. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over both of us. Then I heard movement upstairs, our parents getting ready for bed. They're going to find out, I said. Dad will check his account tomorrow, or he'll try to use the card and it'll be declined. There's no way to hide this. My brother's face went pale. You can't tell them it was me. I don't have to tell them anything. The transaction history speaks for itself. David, please. For the first time since I'd known him, my brother was begging. You don't understand what this will do to me. They'll kick me out. They'll never forgive me. I looked at him sitting there, finally understanding the consequences of his actions, and I felt something strange happen. Instead of anger or satisfaction, I started to laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of the situation had finally hit me. Here was my brother, who had spent months stealing from me and treating me like I was selfish for not funding his lifestyle, now asking me to protect him from the consequences of stealing from our father. The same brother who had called me boring and pathetic, who had dismissed my dreams and mocked my work ethic, was now depending on me to save him. What's so funny? He asked, looking confused and hurt by my reaction. You, I said, still laughing. You're sitting here asking me to cover for you after everything you've done. Do you have any idea how ironic this is? I'm serious, David. I need your help. And I'm serious too, I said, my laughter fading. You're going to have to face Dad yourself. I'm not covering for you anymore. I barely slept that night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd think about what was going to happen in the morning when Dad discovered what my brother had done. Part of me felt guilty for not warning our parents immediately, but a larger part of me felt like my brother needed to face the consequences of his actions on his own. Around 6 a.m, I heard Dad's alarm go off. He was always an early riser, usually up by 6:30 to read the news and drink his coffee before getting ready for work. I lay in bed listening to his footsteps as he went downstairs to start his morning routine. I must have dozed off again because the next thing I heard was my father's voice, loud and angry, coming from downstairs. At first, I thought he might be on a work call that had gone badly, but then I heard my brother's name being shouted, and I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. "What the hell is this?" Dad's voice boomed through the house. $25,000? I got up and quickly threw on some clothes, knowing I was probably going to be pulled into this situation whether I wanted to be or not. I could hear my mother's voice too now, confused and alarmed, asking what was happening. When I came downstairs, I found my father standing in the kitchen holding his laptop, his face redder than I'd ever seen it. My mother was beside him in her bathrobe, looking bewildered as she tried to read the screen over his shoulder. "Where is he?" Dad demanded when he saw me. "Where's your brother?" "I think he's still sleeping," I said, though I suspected my brother was probably awake and hiding in his room, hoping this whole thing would somehow blow over. "Well, he's not sleeping anymore," Dad said grimly, heading toward the stairs. "Not after what he's done." I followed them upstairs, along with my mother, who was still asking what was going on. Dad didn't bother knocking on my brother's door. He just threw it open and stormed into the room. My brother was indeed awake, sitting on the edge of his bed fully dressed, as if he'd been preparing to make a quick escape. When he saw Dad's face, he went completely pale. "Dad, I can explain," he started to say. "Explain," Dad interrupted, his voice rising to a shout. "Explain how you stole $25,000 from me? Explain how you committed fraud with my credit card?" "It's not fraud," my brother said weakly. "I'm your son. I was going to pay you back." "Pay me back?" Dad was practically screaming now. "With what money? You don't have a job. You don't have any income. You don't have anything except what your mother and I give you." My mother had been looking back and forth between them, trying to piece together what was happening. "Someone please tell me what's going on," she said. Dad turned to her, still holding the laptop. "Your precious son used my credit card yesterday to go on a shopping spree. $25,000 in one day. Clothes, restaurants, electronics, even a vacation to Miami." The color drained from my mother's face as she looked at the screen. "That can't be right," she said quietly. "Oh, it's right," Dad said bitterly. "I have the receipts. I have the transaction history. I even checked my online account this morning to make sure it wasn't some kind of mistake. $24,862, to be exact." My brother tried to stand up, but Dad pointed a finger at him. "Sit down. Don't you dare try to leave this room." "Dad, please, let me explain what happened." "What happened?" Dad said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Is that my own son, who I've fed and housed and supported for 23 years, stole from me. What happened is that someone I trusted turned out to be a thief." The word thief hit my brother like a physical blow. I could see him flinch, and for a moment I thought he might break down completely. "I'm not a thief," he said desperately. "I just needed—" "You needed?" Dad's voice rose again. "You needed to spend $600 on dinner? You needed to buy a $2,000 watch? You needed to book a vacation to Miami? How did you even get the card information?" my mother asked, looking confused and hurt. My brother's eyes darted to me, and I could see him considering whether to throw me under the bus somehow. But there was no way to make this my fault, and he seemed to realize that. "It was sitting on Dad's desk," he admitted quietly. "When David was supposed to order Mom's watch." Dad turned to me. "You knew about this?" "I found out last night when I tried to place the order and the card was declined," I said. "That's when I checked the account and saw all the charges." "And you didn't think to tell us immediately?" "I confronted him about it," I said. "I thought he should be the one to tell you what he'd done." Dad nodded grimly, then turned back to my brother. "So you sat here all night knowing what you'd done, knowing you'd stolen from your own family, and you said nothing." "I was trying to figure out how to fix it," my brother said. "Fix it?" Dad laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to fix it? Fine. You can start by returning every single thing you bought yesterday. Every piece of clothing, every electronic device, everything that can be returned." "I already thought about that," my brother said. "Some of it can't be returned. The restaurants, the bars, then you'll work to pay back every penny," Dad said. "You'll get a job, a real job, and you'll work until you've paid back every cent you stole from me." My brother's face crumpled. "Dad, please, I know I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Dad's voice reached a new level of fury. "A mistake is forgetting to turn off the lights when you leave a room. A mistake is putting too much salt in the soup. What you did was a crime. You stole from your own family. For the first time since this whole confrontation began, My brother started to cry. Not the manipulative tears he'd used as a child to get out of trouble, but real, desperate sobs. "I'm sorry," he said through his tears. "I'm so sorry. I know it was wrong. I know I messed up. Please don't hate me." But Dad's expression didn't soften. If anything, he looked even more disgusted. "Don't you dare try to manipulate me with tears. You're 23 years old. You're old enough to understand the difference between right and wrong, and you chose wrong." The next few hours were a whirlwind of phone calls, arguments, and desperate attempts at damage control. Dad immediately called the credit card company to report the fraudulent charges, but since my brother was a family member with access to the card information, the situation was legally complicated. My mother sat at the kitchen table, still in her bathrobe, looking like someone had told her that everything she believed about the world was wrong. She kept staring at the transaction printouts, shaking her head in disbelief. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "This isn't who he is. This isn't how we raised him." Dad was less interested in understanding and more focused on practical solutions. He'd given my brother until noon to gather up everything he'd purchased and figure out what could be returned for cash versus store credit. "And I want receipts for everything," Dad said. "Every single purchase. If you threw away a receipt, you better hope the store can look it up in their system because I'm not taking your word for what anything cost." My brother spent the morning frantically calling stores, trying to explain his situation without admitting to fraud. Most places had return policies that required items to be in original condition, with tags attached, returned within a certain time frame, with receipt and original form of payment. The reality was devastating. Of the nearly $25,000 he'd spent, less than $8,000 could be returned for cash. The rest was either non-returnable like the restaurant and bar charges, only returnable for store credit, or had already been used or damaged. The Miami vacation was the biggest single loss. The travel agency explained that the booking was non-refundable, though they might be able to apply the credit to future travel if my brother wanted to pay a hefty change fee. "Future travel?" Dad said when my brother explained this. "You think you're going to be taking vacations anytime soon? Cancel it. I don't care if we lose the entire $4,500. You're not going to Miami." By afternoon, my brother had managed to return about $6,000 worth of merchandise. He came home with a small pile of cash and several store credit cards, looking exhausted and defeated. "That's it?" Dad asked, looking at the money. "6,000 out of 25,000? Some stores won't take returns without receipts," my brother explained. "And the restaurants obviously can't give refunds for food that's already been eaten." Dad picked up the stack of store credit cards. "What am I supposed to do with these? I don't shop at teen clothing stores or electronics boutiques." "Maybe we could sell them?" my brother suggested weakly. "For a fraction of their value, if anyone even wants them," Dad replied. "Do you realize what you've done? You've stolen nearly $20,000 that we'll never see again." The financial reality was sinking in for my parents. $20,000 wasn't just money they could write off. It was a significant portion of their savings, money they'd planned to use for home improvements and my mother's upcoming medical procedure. My mother finally spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "I think what hurts the most is the lying," she said, looking directly at my brother. "Not just about this, but about everything. We've been supporting you, giving you money, making excuses for you. And this whole time you've been stealing from David and planning to steal from us." My brother looked genuinely surprised that she knew about the money he'd taken from me. "You know about that?" "David told us this morning," she said, "about how you've been taking money from his room for months. Money he worked for. Money he was saving for his future." For the first time since this whole situation began, my brother looked ashamed rather than just scared or angry. Maybe it was easier to justify stealing from our parents because he saw them as authority figures who owed him support. But stealing from me, his brother who had never done anything but work hard and mind his own business, was harder to rationalize. "I was going to pay him back too," he said quietly. "With what?" Mom asked. "You don't work. You don't have any income. You don't have any way to pay anyone back." Dad had been making phone calls while my brother was out returning merchandise, and he came back into the kitchen with a piece of paper and a determined expression. "I found you a job," he announced. My brother looked up hopefully. "Really? Where?" "Morrison Manufacturing. They need workers for the night shift in their packaging department. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 6 days a week. The pay is $14 an hour." I could see my brother's face fall as he processed this information. Morrison Manufacturing was known throughout our town as one of the toughest, most demanding employers around. They hired people that other companies wouldn't touch, but they worked them hard for every penny they paid. Night shift? My brother asked. That's right. And before you even think about complaining, let me explain how this is going to work, Dad said, sitting down at the table. You're going to take this job and you're going to keep this job. Your entire paycheck, minus money for bus fare, is going to go toward paying back what you stole from me. My entire paycheck? What about food, clothes, other expenses? You'll eat what your mother cooks. You'll wear the clothes you already own. And you'll live in this house rent-free while you work off your debt. Consider yourself lucky that I'm not pressing charges and having you arrested. My brother was quiet for a long moment, clearly trying to process the reality of working 60 hours a week at a physically demanding job just to pay back money he'd stolen. How long will it take? He asked finally. Dad pulled out a calculator. At $14 an hour, working 6 days a week, you'll make about $4,300 a month before taxes. After taxes, probably closer to $3,200. At that rate, it'll take you about 6 months to pay back what you can't return through merchandise. 6 months of night shift factory work. 6 months of having no social life, no spending money, no freedom. 6 months of facing the consequences of one day's worth of reckless spending. I start Monday night, my brother said quietly. Yes, you do, Dad confirmed. And if you quit, or if you get fired, or if you miss even one day without being sick enough to be in the hospital, you can find somewhere else to live. The old dynamic of our family had completely shifted in the span of a single day. My brother, who had been the favored son, the one who could do no wrong, was now viewed with suspicion and disappointment. And for the first time in years, my parents were looking at me with something that resembled respect and gratitude. The first week was almost entertaining to watch. My brother had never worked a physically demanding job in his life, and the night shift at Morrison Manufacturing was about as far from his comfort zone as possible. He'd leave the house at 10:30 p.m., looking nervous and exhausted before his shift even started. When he came home at 8 in the morning, he was covered in dust and grime, his clothes soaked with sweat, moving like every muscle in his body ached. It's brutal, he complained to our mother after his third night. We have to load boxes that weigh 30 to 50 pounds each, and we're expected to move at least 200 boxes per hour. My back is killing me. Mom looked sympathetic, which worried me. I could see her maternal instincts kicking in, wanting to comfort her son who was clearly suffering. But Dad was having none of it. Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole $25,000, he said coldly. Physical labor builds character. Maybe some honest work will teach you the value of money. For the first 2 weeks, my brother actually seemed to be trying. He got up for work every night, came home exhausted but without major complaints, and slowly started to understand what it meant to earn money through genuine effort rather than theft or manipulation. I thought maybe this experience might actually change him, might teach him the lessons our parents had failed to instill over the years. I was wrong. By the third week, his true nature started to emerge. He began calling in sick on Friday nights so he could go out with friends. When Dad confronted him about this, he claimed he was genuinely ill, but we all knew he was lying. If you're too sick to work, you're too sick to leave the house, Dad told him. Next time you call in sick, you better be here all weekend recovering. The following week, my brother tried a different approach. He started showing up late for his shifts, claiming traffic or bus delays. When his supervisor called our house to complain, Dad found out that my brother had been arriving anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour late multiple times. They said if it happens again, I'll be written up, my brother explained when Dad confronted him. But it's not my fault. The bus schedule is unreliable. Then take an earlier bus, Dad replied. Or walk. Or figure out another way to get there on time. Your transportation problems are not your employer's responsibility. But the real problem started in the fourth week, when my brother began actively resenting the work itself. He complained constantly about his coworkers, his supervisors, the working conditions, and the demands of the job. The supervisor is a complete jerk, he told us over dinner one evening. He treats everyone like slaves. And my coworkers are all uneducated losers who don't understand that I'm only there temporarily. I could see Dad's jaw tighten. Those uneducated losers show up on time and do their jobs without complaining. Maybe you could learn something from them. I'm better than that place, my brother continued. I shouldn't have to work in a factory like some kind of manual laborer. I have potential that's being wasted there. You have a debt that needs to be paid, Dad said firmly. And right now, Your potential is worth exactly what someone is willing to pay you for it, which is $14 an hour, assuming you can keep the job. The breaking point came during his 6th week at Morrison Manufacturing. My brother had been increasingly vocal about his dissatisfaction with the work, the hours, and the expectations. He'd started taking longer breaks than allowed, arguing with supervisors about productivity requirements, and generally making himself unpopular with everyone he worked with. On a Thursday night, he came home 2 hours early, still wearing his work clothes, but with a smug expression that immediately told me something was wrong. "How was work?" Mom asked as he walked into the kitchen. I told my supervisor exactly what I thought about his management style and his unrealistic expectations, he announced. Then I walked out. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad slowly put down his newspaper and looked at my brother with an expression I'd never seen before. "You quit," Dad repeated quietly. "That's right. I'm not going to let some high school dropout treat me like garbage just because I need the money. You quit the job that was paying for the money you stole from me." "I'll find something better," my brother said confidently. "Something more suited to my skills and abilities." Dad stood up from his chair, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit my brother. Instead, he just stared at him for a long moment. "Your skills and abilities," Dad said slowly. "You mean your skills at spending other people's money and your ability to make excuses for your failures? That's not fair," my brother protested. "I've been working hard for 6 weeks. You've been doing the bare minimum when you felt like it, and complaining constantly about having to do honest work to pay back money you stole. I said I'd find another job." "No," Dad said simply. "You had your chance. You had a job that would have allowed you to pay back your debt and prove that you could be responsible. Instead, you quit because the work was hard." My brother looked confused. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. You don't get another chance. No. You don't get to find a different job that's more to your liking. No. You don't get to keep living here while you figure out your next move. I need to correct something from what I just told you. My brother didn't actually quit his job at Morrison Manufacturing. That was just the story he told us when he came home early that Thursday night. The truth was much worse, and we found out about it the next morning when his supervisor called our house. "I'm calling about your son," the supervisor said when Dad answered the phone. "He was terminated yesterday evening for insubordination and creating a hostile work environment." Dad put the phone on speaker so the whole family could hear. "What exactly happened?" "Well, it started about 2 weeks ago with attendance issues. He was consistently late, sometimes by over an hour. When we talked to him about it, he said it wasn't his fault and that we needed to be more understanding of his transportation challenges." I watched my brother's face as the supervisor continued. He was sitting at the kitchen table looking increasingly uncomfortable as the real story came out. Then there were the productivity issues. He couldn't keep up with the basic requirements of the job, and when other workers tried to help him, he told them he didn't need advice from people who would be working in factories their whole lives. Mom winced at this. Dad's expression was getting darker by the minute. The final straw was yesterday. He got into an argument with me about break times. Company policy allows for 2 15-minute breaks per shift, but he'd been taking 30 to 40-minute breaks. When I spoke to him about it, he told me that he was entitled to adequate rest time and that our policies were unreasonable. "Then what happened?" Dad asked, though I could tell he already knew this wasn't going to end well. He said, and I quote, "I don't have to listen to this from someone who probably never even graduated high school." Then he called me an ignorant supervisor who didn't recognize talent when I saw it. The silence in our kitchen was deafening. My brother was staring at his hands, no longer able to maintain eye contact with anyone. I told him that kind of attitude was unacceptable and that he needed to apologize and get back to work. Instead, he said he was too good for this job and that he deserved better treatment. That's when I terminated him. "I understand," Dad said quietly. "Thank you for calling to let us know. I will say this," the supervisor added before hanging up. "In 15 years of managing night shift workers, I've never had someone show such complete disrespect for the job, the company, and the people trying to help him succeed. I hope he learns from this experience." After Dad hung up, we all sat in silence for a moment. My brother finally looked up, and I could see he was preparing to make excuses or try to spin the story in his favor. "Before you say anything," Dad said, holding up a hand, "let me tell you what I heard. I heard that you were consistently irresponsible about showing up on time. I heard that you couldn't do the basic requirements of the job. I heard that you insulted your coworkers and supervisor. And I heard that you thought you were too good to do honest work." "That's not exactly what happened," my brother started to say. Then tell me exactly what happened, Dad challenged. My brother took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought he might actually tell the truth and take responsibility for his actions. Instead, he launched into a story about unfair treatment, unreasonable expectations, and a hostile work environment. The supervisor had it out for me from day one, he claimed. He gave me the worst assignments and expected me to work twice as hard as everyone else. And my coworkers were jealous because they could see I was smarter than them. Stop, Dad said simply. What? Just stop talking. Every word out of your mouth is making this worse. Mom had been quiet during the whole conversation, but now she spoke up. Did you really tell your supervisor he probably never graduated high school? My brother shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He was being disrespectful to me first. That's not an answer, she said firmly. Did you say that or not? I might have said something like that, but he deserved it. Mom shook her head sadly. I'm disappointed in you. Not just about losing the job, but about how you lost it. That supervisor was trying to help you succeed, and you treated him terribly. He wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to control me. He was doing his job, Dad said, which was to manage employees and make sure they met basic standards of performance and behavior. Standards you couldn't or wouldn't meet. The reality of my brother's situation was becoming clearer. It wasn't just that he'd failed at one job. He'd failed in a way that showed fundamental character flaws. He couldn't accept authority, couldn't work with others, couldn't take criticism or feedback, and couldn't do physical labor without complaining. So what happens now? My brother asked. Now you face the consequences, Dad said. You've proven that you can't or won't do what's necessary to pay back what you stole. You've shown that you don't respect honest work or the people who do it, and you've demonstrated that you haven't learned anything from this experience. I can find another job, my brother said desperately. Where? Dad asked. Morrison Manufacturing is known for hiring people that other companies won't touch. If you can't succeed there, where exactly do you think you'll find work? It was a good question. My brother had now been fired from Morrison Manufacturing for attitude and behavior problems. Word gets around in a small town, especially about problem employees. Most local businesses would probably hear about his termination before he even applied. I'll look in other towns, he said. Maybe I need a fresh start somewhere else. With what money? Mom asked. You don't have a car, you don't have savings, and you've only worked for 6 weeks in the past year. How are you going to support yourself while looking for work in another town? The questions kept coming, and my brother had no good answers for any of them. He'd painted himself into a corner through his own poor choices and bad attitude, and now he was realizing that there might not be an easy way out. The final conversation happened 3 days after we learned the truth about my brother's firing. Dad had spent those days making phone calls to Morrison Manufacturing, to other potential employers, even to some family friends who owned businesses. The message was consistent. Nobody wanted to hire someone with my brother's attitude and work history. On Sunday evening, Dad called my brother into the living room. Mom and I were both there, though I got the sense this was more for witness purposes than because Dad wanted our input on his decision. I've spent the last few days trying to find you another opportunity, Dad began. I called 6 different employers to see if they'd be willing to give you a chance despite what happened at Morrison. 2 of them hung up on me when I mentioned your name. The other 4 said they'd heard about your attitude problems and weren't interested. My brother sat on the edge of the couch, looking smaller and younger than his 23 years. What about places outside of town? I called businesses in 3 neighboring towns, Dad continued. Same response. Word travels fast about problem employees, especially when they insult supervisors and get fired after 6 weeks. I didn't quit, my brother protested weakly. I was fired. You're right. You were fired for being disrespectful and refusing to do the work you were hired to do. That's actually worse than quitting. Mom had been quiet, but I could see she was struggling with what was coming. Despite everything my brother had done, he was still her son, and the maternal instinct to protect him was fighting against her disappointment and anger. There has to be something, she said quietly. Some place that would give him another chance. Dad turned to look at her with an expression that was both sad and resolute. Maybe there is, somewhere, but not while he's living here, eating our food, using our resources, and facing no real consequences for his actions. What are you saying? My brother asked, though I think he already knew. I'm saying you need to leave, Dad said simply. Today, tonight. Pack your things and find somewhere else to stay. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. My brother stared at Dad as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. Leave? Where am I supposed to go? That's your problem to solve, Dad replied. You're an adult. You'll figure it out. But I don't have any money. I don't have a car. I don't have anywhere to go. You had money, Dad said. $25,000 of my money. You chose to spend it on clothes and restaurants and a vacation instead of thinking about your future. Mom stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her back to all of us. I could see her shoulders shaking slightly, and I realized she was crying. Mom, my brother said, his voice cracking. You can't let him do this to me. She turned around, and I could see tears streaming down her face. Do this to you? Do you really think this is something your father is doing to you, instead of something you've done to yourself? I made mistakes, my brother said desperately. But I'm your son. You can't just throw me out on the street. You're not being thrown out on the street, Dad said. You're being asked to take responsibility for your actions and find your own way in the world. Something you should have done years ago. I'll change, my brother pleaded. I'll find another job. I'll pay you back. I'll do whatever you want. You'll find another job where? Dad asked. You've burned bridges with every employer in this area. You've shown that you can't handle authority, can't work with others, and think you're too good for honest work. I'll go to another city. I'll start over somewhere new. With what money? Mom asked through her tears. How will you get there? How will you eat while you look for work? How will you pay for a place to stay? The questions kept coming, each one highlighting how completely unprepared my brother was for independent adult life. He'd never had to budget money, never had to find his own housing, never had to worry about basic survival because our parents had always provided everything he needed. You could give me some money to get started, he suggested, just enough to get on my feet somewhere else. Dad's laugh was harsh. Give you money after you stole from us? After you've shown that you can't be trusted with money? After you've proven that you'll waste whatever you're given? Please, my brother said, and for the first time since I'd known him, he sounded genuinely frightened. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to live on my own. Then you'll learn, Dad said, the same way millions of other people learn, by necessity. But what if I can't? What if I fail? Then you'll fail, Dad replied, and maybe that failure will teach you lessons that our support never could. My brother turned to me, his eyes desperate. David, please, tell them this is crazy. Tell them they can't do this. I looked at him sitting there, finally facing the consequences of years of irresponsible behavior, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no desire to help, no urge to convince our parents to give him another chance. You stole from me for months, I said quietly. You stole from them. You had a job that could have fixed this, and you threw it away because you thought you were too good for honest work. This is what consequences look like. I'll pay you back, he said to me. I'll pay everyone back. Just convince them to let me stay. How? I asked. You don't have a job. You can't get a job. You don't have any money or any way to earn money. What exactly are you going to pay me back with? He had no answer because there was no answer. He'd created a situation where he had no income, no prospects, and no resources, all while owing thousands of dollars to his own family. I need to pack, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You have 2 hours, Dad said. Take whatever clothes and personal items you can carry. Everything else stays here. 2 hours? But where will I go tonight? That's your first adult decision to make, Dad replied. Choose wisely. My brother stood up slowly, looking around the living room as if he were seeing it for the last time. Then he went upstairs to pack, leaving the three of us in heavy silence. 2 hours later, my brother came downstairs with a duffel bag and a backpack. He looked lost and scared, younger than his 23 years, despite everything he'd done. This is really happening? He asked one last time. This is really happening, Dad confirmed. My brother walked to the front door, then turned back to look at us. I love you all, he said. I hope someday you'll forgive me. Then he walked out the door, and for the first time in months, the house was quiet. It's been 8 months since my brother walked out that door, and I'm writing this from the office of my own auto repair shop. Yes, I finally did it. The money I'd been saving, the money he'd tried to steal piece by piece, became the foundation for everything I'd dreamed of building. The first few weeks after he left were strange. The house felt different, quieter, but not in a bad way. It was like we'd all been holding our breath for years, and suddenly we could exhale. Mom went through a period of guilt and worry, wondering if we'd done the right thing, but Dad remained firm in his decision. He needed to learn that actions have consequences, Dad told her during one of their late-night conversations that I overheard. We failed him by protecting him from those consequences for so long. As for my brother, we heard bits and pieces about his situation through mutual acquaintances. He spent the first month staying with various friends, wearing out his welcome in each place as he complained about his circumstances and expected others to support him. Eventually, he ended up at a homeless shelter in the next town over. The shelter required residents to actively look for work and follow strict rules about behavior and sobriety. According to what we heard, my brother lasted 3 weeks before being asked to leave for arguing with staff and refusing to participate in job training programs. After that, the updates became sporadic and concerning. Someone saw him working as a day laborer for cash under the table. Another person mentioned seeing him begging for money outside a grocery store. Each piece of news was painful for my parents, especially my mother, but they held firm to their decision. The transformation in our family dynamic was remarkable. Without my brother's constant drama and financial demands, our parents began to see me differently. They started asking about my work, my plans, my progress toward opening my own business. For the first time in my life, I felt like they were actually proud of me. When I told them I'd saved enough to put a down payment on a small garage space, Dad insisted on co-signing the lease to help me get better terms. When I needed to buy equipment, Mom helped me research the best deals online. They became partners in my success instead of just spectators. 6 months after my brother left, I opened D&R Auto Repair, the initials standing for dependable and reliable, values that had finally been recognized and appreciated in our family. The shop is small, just 2 bays and an office, but it's mine. I earned it through years of hard work, saving, and refusing to give up on my dreams. My parents are regular customers now, bringing their cars to me for maintenance and repairs. They tell their friends about my business, proud to have a son who built something real and lasting. The contrast with how they used to dismiss my work and dreams is striking, but I've chosen to focus on the present rather than dwelling on past hurts. As for the money my brother stole, we never saw most of it again. The credit card company worked with my parents to reduce some of the charges, and the returned merchandise helped, but we still lost about $15,000. My parents had to delay some plans and tighten their budget, but they managed. About 3 months ago, my brother called our house. Mom answered, and I could hear her side of the conversation from the kitchen. He was asking for money, claiming he'd learned his lesson and just needed help getting back on his feet. He promised he'd changed and would pay back everything he owed. Mom listened for a while, then said quietly, "I love you, but I can't help you financially. If you want to have a relationship with this family, you need to prove you can take care of yourself first." He hung up without saying goodbye. That was the last we heard from him directly, though we learned through a friend that he'd moved to a larger city about 3 hours away. Supposedly, he was working at a restaurant and living in a shared apartment with several roommates. Whether this represents genuine change or just another temporary situation, none of us can say. What I can say is that his absence has allowed our family to heal and grow in ways that weren't possible when he was here. We've learned to value consistency over charisma, reliability over charm, and hard work over empty promises. My business is thriving. I'm making more money than I ever did as an employee, and I'm building something that will last. I've even started thinking about expanding, maybe hiring an apprentice, maybe adding a third bay. Dreams that seemed impossible when I was constantly worried about money being stolen from my room now feel achievable. Now, when I lock up my shop each evening and count the day's receipts, I think about the journey that brought me here. Every dollar I save, every customer I serve, every repair I complete successfully is proof that hard work and persistence pay off. My brother chose a different path. He chose immediate gratification over long-term planning, charm over character, taking over earning. Those choices led him to where he is now, just as my choices led me to where I am. I don't hate him for what he did. In a strange way, I'm almost grateful. His theft and the family crisis it created forced everyone to confront the truth about our dynamics. It made our parents see the difference between a son who takes and a son who builds. The house is still quiet in the evenings, but it's a peaceful quiet now. A quiet filled with possibility rather than tension. A quiet where I can finally breathe freely and plan for a future that belongs entirely to me. And that, more than any revenge I could have imagined, is the sweetest victory of all.
My brother pushed my fiancé to cheat on me at his bachelor party to knock me off my pedestal. But he forgot one thing. 4 days before my wedding, I was sitting on my bedroom floor in a half-zipped garment bag kind of mood, staring at the dress like it was going to explain itself. The apartment smelled like cardboard and hairspray and that sugary candle my mother insisted would make the place feel bridal. She says things like that as if the universe responds to adjectives. My phone buzzed. I saw my best friend's name and smiled on reflex, because she'd been my calm voice through every stupid detail. The seating chart drama, the endless emails, my mother's obsession with what other people think. Then I answered, and the way she said my name took the smile right off my face. "Where are you?" she asked. "In my apartment," I said, already bracing, because nobody asks that like it's casual. "Are you alone?" she pressed. I looked around at the mess. Gift bags, ribbons, a stack of printed place cards I'd been obsessively alphabetizing like that could keep my life from falling apart. "Yeah," I said. "What's going on?" She exhaled hard. "Okay. I need you to listen to me and not hang up." And just like that, my stomach dropped, because that sentence only shows up when someone is about to hand you a truth you didn't order. 3 years earlier, my best friend had been cheated on by my brother. Not the movie version where people cry and learn something. The real version, where you find messages, you confront, and the person you trusted looks you in the eye and tries to convince you you're the problem for noticing. She left him. It wrecked her for months. It also wrecked the way my family looked at her, because apparently the greatest sin in our household is making a man face consequences. Yes, I know how that sounds. I wish I were exaggerating. When my best friend left my brother, my mother acted like she'd committed a crime against the family brand. I still remember my mother's voice, soft and disappointed, saying things like, "You don't air private matters," as if cheating is a private matter but consequences are the scandal. She stopped inviting my best friend to birthdays. She stopped answering her texts. She told relatives that my best friend was vindictive. My brother got to be young and confused. She got to be dramatic. That was the translation my family always offered. Men make mistakes. Women make scenes. My best friend didn't fight them. She just stepped back, healed quietly, and kept living. The kind of living that looks boring from the outside but is actually revolutionary when you come from a family that thinks suffering is a virtue. So when my best friend said, "I heard something about his bachelor party," my brain tried to reject it like a bad email attachment. "What did you hear?" I asked. She hesitated, and I could hear her trying to choose words that wouldn't shatter me too violently. "His best friend told me," she said. "Not because he's suddenly a good person, because your brother got drunk and ran his mouth, and now people are talking." My throat went dry. Talking about what? She said it in one rush. My fiancé had gone into a back room with the hired dancer, and my brother had been the one pushing him, hyping him up, acting like he was doing him a favor. She said there were messages afterward, group chat stuff, laughing, celebrating, calling it a last taste of freedom. She said the rumor started when my brother told someone who told someone who told someone, because gossip is a parasite that survives on other people's pain. For a second, I couldn't speak. I stared at my closet door like it was going to open and reveal this was all a prank. My dress hung there, silent, expensive, innocent. "That's not true," I blurted out. Denial came out of my mouth before I could even think. It was like my body needed to say it to stay upright. My best friend didn't push. She just said, "I'm so sorry. I wouldn't do this to you unless I was sure." I hung up and immediately called my fiancé, because if you've ever been blindsided, you know the impulse. Go straight to the source, as if the person who betrayed you will suddenly become honest because you asked nicely. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, babe," he said, warm and normal. "You okay?" Something in my brain went quiet, like it flipped into a cold, focused place. "I need you to tell me what happened at your bachelor party," I said. Silence. Not long, but long enough. "What?" He laughed like I'd said something ridiculous. "Nothing happened. We just hung out." "Did you go into a back room with the dancer?" I asked. He denied it so fast it was almost impressive. "No, absolutely not. Where is this coming from?" I swallowed. If I ask my brother for his phone, what am I going to find? And that's when he froze. I couldn't see him, but I heard it. The tiny hitch in his voice, the sudden rush of words that comes when someone is trying to outrun the truth. "Why are you involving your brother?" he snapped. "This is between us. You're letting people mess with your head." "So something happened," I said, and my voice sounded weirdly calm, which scared me more than yelling would have. He exhaled, long and shaky. "I was drunk," he said. "I don't remember everything. It was stupid. It didn't mean anything. The way he tried to shrink it down, like it was a spilled drink, like it was nothing, made something harden in my chest. I'm not asking if it meant anything, I said. I'm asking if you did it. Another pause, then softer. I don't know, he said. I don't remember, but if anything happened, it wasn't like that. I let out a laugh that sounded wrong even to me. The kind you make when your brain can't decide if it wants to cry or throw something. I hung up without saying goodbye because I didn't trust myself to keep talking. Then I messaged my brother. I kept it simple because if I wrote a paragraph, I'd sound like I was begging. Did my fiancé hook up with someone at his bachelor party? My brother replied almost instantly like he'd been waiting. He got attention from someone who actually knows how to satisfy a man. My hands went cold. Then another message. Now you get it. Then, the perfect one fell off her pedestal. I stared at my phone until my eyes burned. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the smugness, the cruelty, the fact that my brother sounded pleased, like my pain was a prize he'd been owed. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced. I reread messages. I opened my email and stared at vendor contracts like they were a foreign language. I did mental math like it was a comfort object. Deposits, fees, what I'd already paid, what I'd lose. I made myself drink water because my mouth was so dry it hurt. I tried to lie down and my body refused. When the sun came up, I stood in my kitchen and canceled the catering with shaking hands. The woman on the other end sounded sympathetic in that professional way people do when they've said, "I'm sorry to hear that," 1,000 times. When I hung up, my throat tightened so hard I had to lean over the sink and breathe. I walked back into my bedroom and stared at the garment bag. The dress looked ridiculous, like a costume for a life that no longer existed. My name is Brielle, and I wish I could tell you I handled the next part with grace. I didn't. I handled it like a flawed, impulsive woman who'd been told her whole life that being the responsible one meant swallowing everything and smiling. I wasn't smiling anymore. That same afternoon, I called the attorney who'd helped me put our wedding expenses in writing months earlier. Not a prenup. We never even made it to marriage. This was the unromantic, practical piece. A signed breakdown of who paid what and who reimbursed what if things went sideways, because the venue required one primary signer, and I refused to let love be the only plan for my bank account. It wasn't romantic, but it was practical. My attorney had suggested a simple written breakdown because the venue required one primary signer, and I didn't want a financial mess if anything went sideways. When the attorney answered, her voice was calm in that way that made me want to either hug her or scream. I explained what happened, stumbling through it like my mouth couldn't keep up with my brain. I told her the wedding was in 4 days, that I'd started canceling things, that my fiancé was denying and minimizing, that my brother was openly cruel. She didn't gasp. She didn't offer platitudes. She said, "Save everything in writing. Stop having emotional phone calls. If he contacts you, respond once, briefly, and then direct him to me. Make a list of every cost you've paid and every cost he agreed to cover." It felt cold. It also felt like putting shoes on after stepping on glass. Painful, but necessary. After we hung up, I sat on my couch with a notebook and started writing like my life depended on it. Vendor names, deposit amounts, cancellation policies, dates. I pulled up old texts and highlighted the ones where my fiancé said he'd cover specific things. I downloaded contracts and saved them in a folder on my laptop like I was building a case file instead of grieving. 2 days later, I called a cousin who'd been at the bachelor party. He wasn't part of my brother's inner circle. He was the kind of guy who shows up, eats food, laughs politely, and leaves early because he has work in the morning. In other words, the kind of witness I could almost trust. He didn't answer at first. When he finally picked up, he sounded wary, like he'd already been warned. I said, "I'm not asking you to pick sides. I'm asking you to tell me what you saw." He sighed. "I didn't want to be in this," he said, which is exactly what people say right before confirming the worst. He told me my brother was the loudest person in the room all night, that my fiancé kept saying he didn't want to do anything that would mess up our relationship, and my brother kept making prison jokes, how marriage was a life sentence, how this was his last night of freedom. My cousin said my brother kept ordering extra drinks, sliding them toward my fiancé like he was feeding a machine. Then, when the dancer arrived, my brother started chanting and clapping and pushing my fiancé forward, like he wanted to be the director of the moment. "Did you actually see them go into a back room?" I asked. My cousin hesitated. "I saw them disappear," he admitted, "and I saw him come back without his button-down on. Your brother was laughing like he'd won something." After we hung up, my cousin texted screenshots from the group chat. I had to hold my phone with both hands because my fingers kept twitching. There was my brother, writing 2 days after the party. He's not getting married anyway, followed by laughing emojis. Someone asked if the party was good, and my brother wrote, "Mission accomplished." That phrase stuck to my brain like gum. Not because it was clever, because it was proof my brother wanted this damage. Once I had the screenshots, the rest moved fast. I canceled the florist, the rentals, the little extras that add up so quickly you don't notice until the bank balance looks like it got punched. Every vendor had the same polite tone. I'd say, "Hi, I need to cancel." And they'd say, "I'm sorry to hear that." And then they'd slide right into the policy like grief is just a scheduling conflict. I told my parents that night. I drove to their house and sat at the kitchen table, and my mother offered me food, like snacks can patch betrayal. I blurted out what happened before she could ask about centerpieces. My father went quiet the way he does when he's trying not to explode. My mother's first words were, "What will people think?" And I swear I felt something inside me crack. "I'm the one who got cheated on," I said, and my voice shook, which made me feel exposed, which made me furious. My father asked one question, "Did your brother do this?" I showed them the messages. My father's jaw clenched. My mother pressed her lips together, fingers twisting at her ring like she could squeeze the situation smaller. That night, my best friend came over with groceries because she knew I wasn't eating. We sat on my couch and she said, "You are not crazy. You are not overreacting." She said it like she was stitching my sanity back together. And I clung to it because the alternative was sinking. In the days that followed, everything turned into a blur of humiliation and logistics. I live in a mid-sized city in the United States, the kind where news travels through group chats faster than traffic moves. People love to say heartbreak makes you stronger. What it really makes you do is juggle. You juggle grief, anger, paperwork, and the fact that your job still expects you to show up and pretend you aren't walking around with your insides scraped raw. I work an office job that's not glamorous, scheduling, spreadsheets, answering emails for a company that sells boring stuff to other boring companies. It pays my rent. It gives me health insurance. It also comes with coworkers who can smell drama like it's smoke. By day 3, my manager asked, "Everything okay?" In that careful tone people use when they want details, but also want to feel like good people. "I'm fine," I lied, because that's what I do. On my lunch break, I sat in my car and stared at my phone until my eyes crossed. My fiancé texted like nothing happened. "Can we talk? Please. I love you." Then, when I didn't respond fast enough, the tone shifted. "Why are you doing this?" "You're blowing it up. You're letting your friend poison you." Classic. Meanwhile, my brother texted my mother nonstop, trying to get ahead of the story. I only know because my mother kept reading me pieces of it like she was offering evidence of his emotional state, as if that mattered more than what he'd done. "He says he didn't mean it like that. He says you're making him look bad. He says you've always been judgmental." I told her. "He made himself look bad." And she flinched like I'd cursed at the dinner table. A week after my best friend's call, I asked my fiancé's father to meet me at a coffee shop near my apartment, not because I wanted his permission to cancel a wedding. That idea would have made my skin crawl. But because I wanted someone in my fiancé's family to understand that this wasn't just a misunderstanding, he could smooth over with flowers. His father had always been the practical one, calm, no drama, the kind of man who fixed problems quietly, like they were leaky faucets. I also told my brother to meet me there. I didn't tell either of them the other one would be present. I'm not proud of that. I just knew that if I tried to confront them separately, my brother would lie and my fiancé would hide behind plausible deniability. Together, they would either keep their stories straight like a well-rehearsed play, or they'd trip over each other. When I walked into the coffee shop, my stomach was doing that tight, floaty thing like I'd swallowed a stone. I wore a plain sweater and jeans, no makeup, hair in a messy knot, because I couldn't stand the idea of looking like the bride in public. I wanted to feel invisible. Instead, I felt like everyone could see the word humiliated stamped on my forehead. My fiancé's father arrived first. He stood when he saw me, polite, concerned. "You said it was important," he said. "It is," I replied. Then my brother walked in, swaggering like he owned the place. He smiled at me like he thought we were about to share a joke. I wanted to throw my drink at him. I didn't, because I have a lifetime of training in being the good one. My brother looked at the older man, then at me. "What's this?" he asked. My fiancé's father frowned. "Who are you?" "My brother," I said, and watched my brother's expression shift a fraction. He realized. He didn't like it. I didn't accuse right away. I asked simple questions. When did the party start? Who arranged the lounge add-on? Who paid for the extra time? The more neutral I sounded, the more my brother relaxed into talking. He loves an audience. It was just a party, he said. Guys being guys. No big deal. She's freaking out because she likes to control everything. He said it right in front of my fiancé's father, which told me he thought charm could erase facts. My fiancé's father looked uncomfortable. There was a dancer? He asked. My brother shrugged. It's normal. It's not like anyone got hurt. I let him talk until he contradicted himself. At first he claimed nothing happened. Then he said something might have happened, but it wasn't serious. Then he insisted he wasn't even around for most of it. He moved through versions like he was trying on outfits, searching for the one that would make him look least guilty. My fiancé's father finally said, "So did my son go into a back room with her?" My brother laughed. He was drunk. He probably doesn't remember. It was just... He waved his hand. It was harmless. I took out my phone and slid it across the table. I didn't have to make a speech. I just opened the screenshots my cousin sent and let the proof speak. My fiancé's father stared. I watched his face change as he read. The laughing. The mission accomplished. The message describing my fiancé disappearing into the back room. The celebratory responses. He looked up slowly. Is this real? He asked. My brother's eyes narrowed. It's a joke, he said quickly. Group chats are always like that. People exaggerate. Then why did you write it? I asked. Still calm, still controlled, which felt like holding a knife by the blade. My brother shrugged, then slipped into his favorite move, making me the problem. Because she needed to be taken down a peg, he said. She walks around like she's better than everyone. Miss Perfect. Miss, I pay my bills on time. It gets old. My fiancé's father looked like he'd been slapped. You sabotaged your sister's wedding because you felt insecure? He asked, voice low. My brother scoffed. Sabotaged? God. You people are dramatic. I watched my fiancé's father's hands tighten around his cup. He didn't yell. He didn't slam his fist. He just said, I'm going to speak to my son, in a tone that made it clear the conversation would not be pleasant. When the older man walked out, my brother leaned back and smirked. So what? You're canceling because of some flirting? He asked. You're going to throw away 5 years because your man had one night? I looked at him and realized something I should have realized a long time ago. My brother didn't believe I deserved anything stable. He believed stability was something I performed, not something I earned. If he couldn't have it, I couldn't either. I'm canceling because he lied, I said, and because you enjoyed hurting me. My brother's smile slipped. You're overreacting, he muttered. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. Get used to people knowing the truth, I said, and I walked out before my face could give me away. I cried in my car instead, like a cliché, because apparently I'm not immune to clichés when my life explodes. That night, my fiancé's father called me. His voice sounded older. He admitted it, he said quietly. He says he was drunk and he's sorry. He says your brother pushed him. I stared at the wall. So he's a grown man who can be pushed into cheating, I said. Good to know. His father didn't defend him. That was the only gift in that call. He just said, I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry you're going through this. And after that, his family stopped defending him publicly. They didn't post explanations or excuses. Silence was the closest thing to an apology they could manage. I hung up and sat on my couch for a long time, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, because life keeps making boring noises even when you feel like you're dissolving. Before I sent anything to anyone, I asked my attorney one blunt question. Can I get in trouble for sharing screenshots? She told me not to play internet lawyer, to avoid adding commentary, to blur names of unrelated people, and to stick to what was directly relevant. She said the same thing my father would later say in his own language. If you don't want people to see your words, don't write them. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I sent evidence into the 2 biggest group chats connected to my life, one for my extended family, one for the wedding party, without a single caption. I cropped out names of anyone who wasn't directly involved. I blacked out profile photos. I didn't add accusations or a story, just timestamps and their words, because facts don't need a narrator. Then I muted both chats and walked away from my phone like it was hot. Part of me wanted to be above it. Part of me wanted to keep it private, to handle it with dignity, because that's what my mother would prefer. Quiet suffering, no mess, no public consequences. But another part of me, this newer part that was sick of being everyone's emotional cushion, knew exactly what would happen if I stayed silent. My brother would frame himself as the victim. My fiancé would rewrite it as a misunderstanding. And I'd be the unstable bride who couldn't handle a joke. I wasn't going to let them get ahead of the truth. Not this time. Within hours, the wedding party chat turned into chaos. People asked questions. People posted their own memories of my brother acting reckless. A couple of friends tried to play mediator, the way people do when they want to feel mature but don't want to actually take a stand. My best friend texted me separately. "You did the right thing." My cousin sent me a simple, "I'm here," which felt better than any speech. The family chat was worse. My mother called me in tears. "Why would you air this out?" she wailed. "Do you want everyone to hate him?" I had to bite back the impulse to say, "Yes." Instead, I said, "I want everyone to know what he did." She cried harder. "He's your brother." I stared at the ceiling and tried to breathe. "And I was his sister," I replied. Apparently, that didn't matter to him. My brother, predictably, launched a counterattack on a social media app within half a day. He posted a long, dramatic rant about how I was spiraling and creating a narrative because I was scared of commitment. He said I'd always been controlling. He said I was using a harmless party as an excuse to run. My fiancé posted too. Not an apology, not an explanation, an accusation. He implied I was paranoid. He implied my best friend manipulated me because she still wasn't over my brother. He wrote a line about how he'd just talked to someone and I turned it into a scandal. People responded under his post with the screenshots. Watching strangers publicly fact-check the man I thought I'd marry was surreal. It felt like my personal life had turned into a comment section. Then the venue email hit. It landed in my inbox mid-afternoon while I was at work pretending to care about a scheduling issue. The subject line was something like, "Additional charges due to contract violation." My heart started pounding before I even opened it. The venue manager wrote that during the private lounge reservation, there had been smoking in a prohibited area and spilled alcohol on the carpet, leaving a stain that required a deep cleaning. They attached photos. They attached an invoice. They wrote, politely but firmly, that because the lounge add-on had been attached to my wedding package, same account, same contract, same primary signer, I was responsible for the cost. The manager's email also included a detail that made my blood go cold. The lounge add-on didn't require a brand new contract. It was an option inside the same booking portal. One approval click, one deposit. That was it. My brother didn't have to forge my signature or steal my identity. He just exploited the fact that add-ons didn't require a new contract, just an approval click and a deposit. They had my card on file. They had my name on the paperwork. In their eyes, I was the responsible party. I sat there in my cubicle, staring at the screen, and I felt this wave of anger so hot it made the back of my neck burn. My brother had used my wedding contract to book his stupid last night lounge to save money. My fiancé had gone along with it. And now, even after the betrayal, even after the humiliation, I was the one getting billed. I forwarded the email to my attorney and then, because I am human and impulsive, I texted my brother, "You used my venue contract for your party, and now they're charging me for damage." He replied, "Not my problem." I stared at that message until my vision blurred. Not my problem. As if he hadn't made it his problem when he decided my joy needed to be destroyed. I paid the fee that night. Not because I accepted responsibility, but because my name was on the contract and I refused to let my credit get wrecked on top of everything else. I also asked the venue manager, politely, for written confirmation that the lounge reservation had been booked through my package, and for any logs they had of who checked in and who signed the lounge rules. It wasn't glamorous revenge. It was boring adult survival. The venue manager called me the next morning after I asked for logs. She sounded apologetic but firm, like she was trained to be empathetic without giving away leverage. She confirmed that the lounge add-on had been booked through the same portal as my wedding, and that the confirmation email went to the address on file. Mine. She also forwarded a separate message thread where my brother asked about extending the lounge, adding a late-night snack tray and whether staff would look the other way if the guys got loud. It was written in that half-joking, half-entitled tone men use when they assume rules are flexible for them. She couldn't give me credit card details for whoever physically clicked the add-on because venues don't hand out payment information just because you're furious. But she could give me something better for court. The audit log showing the add-on was attached to my contract ID, the time it was approved, and the emails used during the back and forth. My brother's address was on the thread. His name wasn't on my contract, but his fingerprints were all over the planning. She also told me they didn't have security footage inside the lounge because it was marketed as private, and they prioritized client privacy. That annoyed me for about 5 seconds, until I realized it didn't matter. I wasn't trying to prove every sloppy detail of the night. I was trying to prove responsibility for charges. In court, boring proof beats dramatic rumors. I thanked her, hung up, and saved every attachment twice, because apparently betrayal turns you into an amateur records clerk. By the time the week of what was supposed to be my wedding arrived, my apartment looked like a warehouse of canceled dreams. Boxes of decorations, bags of favors, a pile of mail that included refund checks for tiny amounts that felt insulting. My dress still hung in the closet like it was mocking me. My mother insisted we still do the pre-wedding brunch at my parents' house because it was already paid for, and people expect it. She wanted to convert it into a supportive family lunch, which sounded nice on paper and terrifying in reality. I agreed because part of me wanted witnesses. Part of me wanted my brother to be forced to look at me while the consequences settled in. I texted the relatives who were already coming. The wedding is canceled. The gathering is still happening because I need to address things and I don't want rumors doing it for me. I kept it short. If I got emotional in a group text, my mother would take it as proof I was being dramatic. My brother showed up early, of course. He loves controlling rooms. He walked through my parents' house like he owned it, greeting people loudly, making jokes, setting himself up as the friendly host. I watched from the kitchen while my best friend stood beside me, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. "He's trying to prime them," she murmured. "I know," I whispered back, and my fingers kept picking at a paper napkin like it was a nervous habit I couldn't switch off. When everyone finally sat down, my mother cleared her throat and tried to give some speech about family and healing. My father stared at his hands like he was restraining himself from saying something that would set the house on fire. Then my brother launched into his version without being asked. He said I'd misunderstood. He said my fiancé didn't cheat. He said guys talk big in group chats. He said I was punishing everyone because I couldn't handle the idea of being married. I let him talk. I asked questions like I was doing customer service. "So you didn't book the lounge? So you didn't write mission accomplished? So you didn't say he wasn't getting married anyway?" Each question was a small hook, and he kept stepping on them because he can't stand silence. When he finally stopped, looking smug, I pulled out my tablet and played the screenshots in order. Not all of them, just the ones that mattered. My cousins, my brothers, the message describing my fiancé disappearing into the back room, the celebratory replies, the mission accomplished, the "now you get it." The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet, heavy quiet. A relative who'd always babied my brother asked, "Why would you do this to her?" And my brother's face flashed with rage. My best friend stood up. "Because he hates being held accountable," she said, voice firm. "He did it to me, too. He wants to tear women down so he can feel powerful." My brother sputtered something about her being bitter. She didn't flinch. "I'm not bitter," she said. "I'm free." My brother shoved his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. He glared at my mother. "Pick," he snapped. "Either you're with her or I'm done with this family." My mother looked like she might faint. And there it was, the old pattern laid bare. My brother creating a crisis to see who would comfort him. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a framed photo rattled. I sat there numb. My mother started whispering about him being hurt. And my father finally spoke. "He meant it," my father said, voice flat. "And you keep giving him permission." Nobody responded because no one in my family is good at sitting with truth when it's uncomfortable. After everyone left, my mother cornered me in the kitchen and begged me to call my brother. "He's going to cut us off," she said, panicked. "He'll disappear." I looked at her and felt something in me go still. "Then he'll disappear," I said. "I'm not chasing him anymore." 2 weeks after the canceled wedding date, my life had settled into a new kind of misery, the normal kind that still has deadlines. I went to work, I answered emails, I bought groceries, I watched the world keep spinning while mine felt stuck. My attorney sent formal demand letters to my fiancé and my brother, not in a dramatic courtroom speech way. In a boring, firm, "Here is what you owe, here are the documents supporting it, here is the deadline" way. When my attorney drafted the demand letters, she included a clean timeline because courts love boring clarity. She attached the screenshots as exhibits. She attached the venue email and invoice. She attached the contract page showing my name as the primary signer. She attached the text where my fiancé agreed to cover specific costs. Every piece of it felt humiliating, like turning my heartache into paperwork, but it also felt empowering in a weird way. Grief is messy. Evidence is organized. The letters gave them a set number of days to respond. I didn't want to become the woman who sued her family. I wanted my money back and my peace back. But I also refused to be the woman who got financially punished for other people's choices because everyone expected her to be quiet about it. My brother ignored the letter completely, like it was spam. My fiancé responded with a flood of messages. He called, He left voicemails. He emailed. He even showed up outside my apartment one evening, standing near the entrance like a sad statue, as if proximity alone could rewire me. I didn't let him in. I talked through the door like I was in a bad sitcom. "You need to leave," I said, my forehead pressed to the wood because my legs felt weak. "Please," he said. "I need to talk to you. I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I snapped before I could stop myself. He started crying. Actual crying. It would have pulled on my heart if he hadn't followed it with, "Your brother pushed me. He was in my head all night. He kept calling me weak. He kept saying I'd regret it if I didn't do something. I was drunk, Brielle." I stood there, breathing hard. "So you're telling me you're a puppet," I said, "a grown man with no spine." "That's not fair," he protested, which was almost funny. Not haha funny. More like, "Of course that's what you focus on funny." He added, "I'm paying for it now." "Are you sorry because you hurt me?" I asked. "Or because you got caught?" He flinched. "Both," he admitted, and I swear that honesty was the most insulting part. "I'm not discussing this," I said. "Talk to my attorney." He cursed under his breath. "You're ruining my life," he hissed, and there it was. The real emotion. The one that mattered to him. I closed the door gently and locked it, then slid down onto the floor and shook with adrenaline. Not because I missed him, because I hated that my heart still tried to do that loyal thing. A few weeks later, his attorney contacted mine with a proposal, a payment plan. It wasn't a pity offer. It was a reality offer. My fiancé didn't have a pile of cash sitting around. He had bills, loans, and an ego that was now being stomped by his own consequences. He offered monthly payments over a couple of years, with a written schedule, because he wanted to avoid a formal hearing. My attorney asked me what I wanted. What I wanted was to never hear his voice again. What I wanted was to rip out the part of my brain that kept remembering the good moments like a traitor. What I wanted was impossible. So I picked the practical option. I agreed to the payment plan with two conditions. He would stop contacting me directly, and he would sign a clause confirming he understood the wedding was canceled because of his actions, and that he wasn't allowed to publicly claim I lied about him. My attorney said it in legal language. I said it in human language. "Do not rewrite me as the villain." He signed. My brother still refused. When my attorney's office called him, he yelled at the receptionist and claimed he hadn't done anything illegal. He said I was being dramatic. He said I was obsessed with punishing him. He offered a small fraction of the amount and framed it like generosity. My attorney asked, "Do you want to settle for that?" I pictured my brother's "not my problem" text. I pictured him smirking in that coffee shop. I pictured my mother twisting her ring and trying to make me responsible for everyone's comfort. I pictured my father's deadpan voice. He meant it. "No," I said. "He can learn." Around that time, I started therapy. Not because I wanted to become enlightened, because I was having moments where I'd be in the grocery store and suddenly my chest would tighten like I was back in that phone call. I'd be driving and a wedding ad would flash by and my ears would ring. I'd lie in bed and hear my brother's words on a loop. Now you get it. Therapy didn't turn me into a serene saint. It gave me tools. My therapist had me practice saying no out loud in a mirror because my voice used to betray me, rise at the end like a question, soften like an apology. She made me write down the rules I'd grown up with. The invisible ones. Don't embarrass the family. Don't upset your brother. Don't make your mother cry. Don't take up too much space. Then she had me write counter rules like I was rewriting a contract with myself. My pain counts. My safety matters. I don't owe access to anyone who hurts me. Family is not a hall pass. She also taught me how to come down from the adrenaline spikes. I learned to name 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear, 2 things I could smell, and 1 thing I could taste. It sounded cheesy until it stopped my hands from shaking in a grocery store aisle. I learned to stop arguing with people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I learned that repeating the same boundary in the same calm tone is not cold. It's consistent. Little by little, I rebuilt routines that weren't built around managing other people's emotions. I started walking after work with a podcast in my ears, not because I was chasing healing, but because movement reminded my body it belonged to me. I stopped checking my phone first thing in the morning. I stopped reading my brother's posts when people sent them. I curated my life the way I used to curate seating charts, carefully, on purpose, without apologizing for the empty chairs. I even changed small things: new grocery store, different coffee place, a new route to work. Because sometimes you don't need a dramatic transformation. You need fewer reminders. My therapist didn't tell me to move on. She asked me why my brother's cruelty hit so hard, and I said without thinking, because he's been punishing me my whole life for being the stable one. The therapist raised an eyebrow. Punishing you how? And suddenly I had a million small memories. My brother mocking me for studying, calling me boring, breaking my stuff by accident, making fun of my friends, telling me no one would want me if I kept acting better than everyone. I'd always brushed it off because I didn't want to be the sensitive sister who couldn't take a joke. I see now that the joke was that I believed him. One evening, my mother called and asked me to reconsider, not because she thought I was wrong, but because she was terrified my brother would cut her off and she wouldn't get to be the mother who keeps the family together. "He's your brother," she whispered. "I'm your daughter," I replied, and my voice was so calm it startled even me. "Why is he the one you're afraid to lose?" She didn't answer. She just cried. And I hung up, because I was tired of being the person who stayed on the line to soothe everyone else while my own heart sat there bleeding. A month after the wedding date that never happened, my fiancé asked, through my attorney, for a brief, in-person conversation. Closure, he called it. I called it emotional self-harm. But my therapist said something that stuck. Avoiding a conversation because you're scared isn't the same as having a boundary. A boundary is a choice. Avoidance is a wound controlling you. So I agreed to meet him in the parking lot of my apartment building in the late afternoon while it was still light out, in a spot near the entrance where other people were coming and going. I didn't bring a friend because I didn't want it to become a spectacle. I also didn't trust myself not to use my best friend as a shield. I wanted to see if I could stand there on my own. He showed up with messy hair and a face that looked like he'd been sleeping badly. For a second, my body did that stupid, familiar thing. Heart tug, warmth, memory. Like it didn't get the memo that he'd wrecked us. Then he opened his mouth and the reality snapped back. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I need you to hear it from me." I crossed my arms. "I've heard it," I said. "In messages, in voicemails, in your post where you implied I was losing my mind." His face tightened. "I was panicking," he muttered. "I felt attacked." I laughed softly. "You felt attacked? That's incredible." He ran a hand through his hair. "Your brother was in my ear all night." He started again, like it was a prayer he could repeat until it became absolution. He kept calling me weak. He kept saying marriage would ruin me. He said you'd leave me eventually anyway because you're too good for me. My chest tightened. "Did you believe him?" I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than any speech. "I was drunk," he said finally. "I was insecure. I wanted to feel wanted." "You were wanted," I snapped. "I was marrying you." He winced. "I know." We stood there in silence while someone walked past us carrying groceries, glancing at us like we were a normal couple having a normal argument, which felt surreal. I said, "Are you here to apologize or are you here to negotiate?" He swallowed. "Both," he admitted. "You're paying," he said quickly. "I'm doing the plan. I'm selling stuff. I'm cutting back. I'm trying to fix it." "You can't fix it," I said. "You can pay what you owe. That's not fixing. That's just not stealing." His eyes flashed. "You're acting like I'm a monster," he protested. "No," I said, voice steady. "I'm acting like you're a man who made choices and now wants comfort because the consequences hurt." He stepped closer, like instinctively reaching for something familiar. I stepped back. He stopped. I saw a flicker of anger cross his face and my pulse jumped. "You're going to make me pay for this forever," he said, voice bitter. "I'm going to make you pay what you agreed to pay," I corrected. "The rest is on you." He reached out, grabbed my forearm. Not hard, not bruising, but possessive, like he could anchor me to him. My skin crawled. "Don't," I said sharply, and he let go like he'd been burned. I stared at the spot his fingers had been, my pulse loud in my ears. "If you ever touch me like that again," I said, "I will call the police. Not because I want drama, because I want safety." His face drained. "I didn't mean, I don't care what you meant," I snapped. "I care what you did." He backed away, hands up, like I'd pulled a weapon instead of words. He nodded, eyes wet, and then he walked to his car and drove off. That night, I blocked his number. The payment plan continued through the attorneys. He could be sorry from a distance. A few weeks later, my mother tried to stage what she called a family reset during a holiday weekend. She invited my brother without telling me, hoping I'd show up and feel trapped into being civil. That's her style. Force proximity. Call it healing. When I walked into my parents' living room and saw my brother lounging on the couch like nothing happened, my stomach dropped. My mother smiled too brightly. My father looked tired. "Oh, good," my mother chirped. "You're both here. We can talk." My brother smirked. "Look who finally showed up," he said. I set my keys down slowly. "You ambushed me," I said to my mother. She fluttered her hands. "I just want peace," she pleaded. "I want us to move on." My brother laughed. "Move on from what? Your little canceled wedding? People have real problems, you know." Something in me snapped, not the explosive kind, the quiet kind, the kind that turns a door in your mind from open to locked. I looked at my brother. "You're paying," I said. He rolled his eyes. "You're obsessed." "I'm done," I said, and turned to my mother. "If you ever put me in a room with him again without telling me, I will stop coming here. You can have your peace. It just won't include me." My mother's face crumpled. "You'd abandon your family?" she whispered, horrified. I almost laughed. "He already did," I said. "You just keep pretending he didn't." I walked out. I sat in my car and let the air shake in my lungs. Because leaving felt like betrayal, and also like breathing. That was the first time I chose myself over the role I'd been assigned. Meanwhile, my brother's case moved forward in the most boring way possible. Paperwork, deadlines, a scheduled small claims civil hearing months out. I also had to accept a small, humiliating truth. I wasn't suing because I loved conflict. I was suing because my brother had learned that if he created enough noise, everyone would rush to calm him down and ask me to compromise. Paperwork was the only language he couldn't interrupt. Around that time, my best friend came over with takeout and sat on my couch like she belonged there. She watched me poke at my food and finally said, "You're allowed to be done." "I feel like a monster," I admitted. "You're not a monster," she said. "You're just no longer available for their nonsense." We sat there a while and then she added, "You know he did this because he wanted you to feel what I felt." I blinked. "What?" She nodded. "When I left him, he blamed me for his embarrassment. He didn't process it, he stored it. Then he saw your wedding and thought, finally, her turn." I stared at my hands. My brother's "now you get it" text suddenly made sick sense. He didn't just want to knock me off a pedestal. He wanted me to understand pain the way he understood it. Except he didn't understand it as pain he caused. He understood it as something done to him. Waiting for the hearing was its own kind of torture. The sanitized, bureaucratic kind. There were filing fees, scheduling notices, rescheduled dates because someone's attorney had a conflict, and long stretches where nothing happened at all. People assume legal action is dramatic. Most of it is just patience and printing. My brother tried to weaponize that waiting. He'd tell relatives, "See, nothing's happening. She's bluffing." He wanted the process to exhaust me into silence. It didn't. The hearing happened in late spring, months after the canceled wedding, on a weekday morning that started with me staring at my closet like it was going to choose an outfit for me. I picked something plain and comfortable because I refused to look like I was dressed for a performance. My attorney met me outside the building, calm as always, holding a folder thick with the evidence I'd collected. Inside, the hallway smelled like stale coffee and anxiety. People sat on benches clutching paperwork. No one looked heroic. Everyone looked tired. It was strangely comforting. My brother showed up late, wearing a forced smile, acting like he was attending a casual appointment. He tried to wink at me. I didn't respond. He leaned toward my mother, who had insisted on coming, and whispered something that made her flinch. My father sat on my other side, silent, steady. When we were called in, we sat at separate tables. My brother brought his own attorney, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My brother kept tapping his foot, restless, like a child waiting for recess. Small Claims is not a movie. No jury, no theatrics, just receipts, emails, and who was legally tied to the charges. The judge was practical, not dramatic. She asked for the basic timeline. My attorney laid it out simply. The lounge add-on tied to my wedding package, the email confirming my brother arranged it, the venue invoice for damages, the screenshots proving the group chat described what happened, the documented costs I paid because my name was on the contract. My brother's attorney tried to frame it like I was overreaching. He said the group chat was joking. He said my brother didn't physically spill anything. He suggested the venue manager could be exaggerating. The judge asked my brother one direct question. "Did you arrange the lounge reservation?" My brother shrugged. "I helped," he said. "But it was for the groom." "So you did arrange it," the judge clarified. My brother rolled his eyes. "Sure," he said, like he was agreeing to a silly detail. The judge looked unimpressed. She asked about the email. My brother tried to claim he only CC'd himself. My attorney handed over the printed chain where my brother confirmed details like he was the organizer. The judge read it, slowly, then set it down. My brother started talking, too much, too fast. He said I was punishing him. He said I'd always hated him. He said I was using this as an excuse to take him down because I thought I was better than him. He said, "She's always been the perfect one." Like that was proof of something. The judge held up a hand. "This isn't about your sibling dynamic," she said. "This is about responsibility for expenses tied to a contract." My brother's face flushed. He muttered, "It's not fair," under his breath. And in that moment, I saw him exactly as he was. A grown man who thought fairness meant being protected from consequences. The judge made a decision that day. Not every single item in my list was granted. Some things were reduced. Some were deemed too indirect. But the core pieces were clear. The venue damages tied to the lounge reservation, the documented costs connected to his role as organizer, part of the court fees. My brother was ordered to pay. Outside the room, my brother turned to me, face red. "You ruined me," he spat. I stared at him. My hands were trembling, but my voice was steady. "You did this," I said. "You could have paid months ago and ended it. You chose this instead." He laughed bitterly. "You're so cold now," he sneered. "No," I said. "I'm warm with the people who don't hurt me." My mother stepped between us, desperate. "Please," she begged to both of us, like she could patch this by sheer will. My father put a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "It's done." On the drive home, my mother stared out the window and kept wiping at her cheeks. Not for me, not for what I lost, but for the fact that her fantasy of a close, peaceful family was crumbling. I felt relief and grief at the same time. That mix became familiar. My brother paid in chunks. He had to sell his vehicle. He had to borrow. He had to give up whatever he used to distract himself. He complained to anyone who would listen. Most people didn't listen. The relatives who'd once defended him got quieter. My mother tried to turn his payments into a tragedy. "He had to sell his vehicle," she would say, as if that was an injustice instead of a consequence. She'd tell me he was stressed, that he was losing sleep, that he was scared. I started responding the same way every time. I was scared too. Then I'd stop talking. She hated that. She wanted me to provide the emotional soundtrack to his suffering. I refused. If my brother needed comfort, he could find it in the person he'd always relied on to smooth things over. Our mother. I was done being his soft landing. My fiancé kept paying too. Month after month, a deposit would land according to the schedule. Sometimes my attorney would forward a brief confirmation. Sometimes I'd see a note attached where he tried to sound regretful without being manipulative. I didn't reply. About a year after the canceled wedding, I moved into a different apartment. Same city, different neighborhood, different walls. I needed a place that didn't hold so many echoes. The night I packed, I found the wedding leftovers I'd shoved into a storage closet. Unused decorations, a guest book no one signed, tiny favors still in their bags, a stack of receipts that felt like a museum exhibit of my naivety. The dress was still there too because I couldn't bring myself to touch it for months. Not because I wanted it, because it felt radioactive. Like if I opened the garment bag, I'd inhale the version of my life that didn't happen and choke. So I did something impulsive again. I posted it online and sold it for a fraction of what it cost. After that, I went through the wedding leftovers like I was cleaning out a storage unit for someone else. I returned what I could. I donated unopened decor to a community center that hosted small events for families who couldn't afford the fancy stuff. I handed my mother the guest book and told her she could keep it if she needed a souvenir of her own expectations. She looked at it like it had personally insulted her. I didn't feel cruel. I felt done. The day a stranger came to pick up the dress, I didn't cry. I felt hollow. She held it up and smiled and said, "It's beautiful." I nodded and said, "It is," because it was, and because it didn't matter. When she left with it, I stood in my doorway and let the silence settle. Then I went back inside and cleaned, because apparently my coping mechanism is tidying when I can't control anything else. My relationship with my mother changed. She stopped trying to force reconciliation after I walked out on the holiday ambush. Or more accurately, she learned I would actually leave. She still made little comments. "He's still your brother. Families forgive. Time heals." Like she was reading from a script. I stopped arguing. I just said, "I'm not discussing him," and changed the subject. It drove her crazy at first. Then it became normal. My father, in his quiet way, started calling me more. Not to talk about feelings. He'd ask if my car was running okay, if my job was treating me right, if I needed help moving furniture. It was his version of love. I learned to accept it without wishing he'd say more. My brother tried once to contact me directly after he'd paid most of what he owed. He sent a message that read, "Can we talk like adults?" which made me laugh out loud because the audacity was almost impressive. I didn't respond. A week later, he sent another. "You got what you wanted. Are you happy?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, "I wanted a brother who loved me," and deleted it, because giving him my honest pain felt like handing him a weapon. So I wrote, "Do not contact me again." He didn't. Not because he respected my boundary, because he hates being ignored. The last payment from my fiancé came about 2 years after the wedding that never happened. My attorney emailed me a confirmation. "Final payment received," she wrote. That was it. No fireworks, just a line of text and an ended attachment. That night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Curiosity got me. I answered, and I heard my fiancé's voice. "Brielle," he said softly, like my name still belonged to him. My skin prickled. "Why are you calling?" I asked. I wanted to say I paid everything," he said, "and I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Still, I don't expect anything from you. He trailed off, waiting for me to fill the silence the way I used to. "I hope you learned something," I said. "Do not call me again." He exhaled like he'd been punched. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." I hung up, blocked the number, and sat there for a minute with my heart pounding. Not because I missed him, because I felt proud. Because I'd just done something that would have been impossible for the version of me who thought love meant endless access. A couple of months later, I got invited to a cousin's backyard cookout. Nothing fancy. Paper plates, kids running around, someone overcooking burgers and acting proud about it. I almost didn't go. Social events made me tense because I never knew if my brother would be there like an uninvited shadow. But I went anyway, because rebuilding a life happens in small, boring choices. At first, it was fine. I laughed at a joke. I talked about work. I pretended I was normal. Then, across the yard, I saw my brother walk in with a case of drinks like he was the hero bringing supplies. My stomach flipped. My throat tightened. He spotted me and smirked like he'd been waiting to see if I'd run. Instead, I did something different. I didn't leave. I didn't confront him. I just turned back to my cousin and asked if there was any extra ice. I stayed by the cooler with the women who were talking about daycare costs and rent increases and how everyone's back hurts now. Normal stuff. Real stuff. The stuff my brother can't compete with because it doesn't revolve around him. He drifted closer a few minutes later, trying to slide into the circle with that fake charm. He opened his mouth to make a joke, something about me being uptight, and my cousin cut him off, sharp. "Not here," she said. My brother blinked. "What?" She didn't soften. "Not here," she repeated. "If you want to be invited, you behave." I watched my brother's face change in real time. Surprise, anger, humiliation. He looked around for backup. No one jumped in. A couple people avoided his eyes. Someone kept talking about groceries like nothing happened. He tried to laugh it off. "Wow," he said. "So we're policing jokes now?" My cousin shrugged. "We're policing you," she said casually, like it was obvious. My brother stood there for a second, trapped in the quiet. Then he walked away, shoulders stiff. He didn't slam a door this time. He didn't threaten to disappear. He just left the circle because the attention wasn't his anymore. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something better. Safe. Later, when the sun started going down and the kids were winding down, I sat on a folding chair with a paper plate balanced on my knees and realized I wasn't bracing anymore. I wasn't scanning the yard for threats. I wasn't waiting for my brother to say something that would require me to defend my existence. I was just there, surrounded by people talking about ordinary problems and ordinary joys. That's what boundaries buy you, the ability to be boring again. I'm not writing this because I think I'm brave. I'm writing it because I know there are other women like me, women who get labeled too much the second they stop absorbing everyone else's chaos. If you're that woman, here's the thing I learned the hard way. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Boundaries are the price of being allowed to stay in your own life. I still have bad days. I still get triggered by wedding ads and group chats and the phrase, "be the bigger person." I still sometimes miss the fantasy version of my brother, the one who would have defended me instead of sabotaging me. But I don't miss the version of me who thought she had to earn love by being convenient. That version of me is gone. And honestly, mission accomplished.